This episode of Making History was inspired by channel subscriber Johnny Reb 1977. If you have any ideas for future videos, please leave them in the comments. I'm Bill Scott, and I'm making history.
Late in the Civil War, in March 1864, while Ulysses S. Grant was being commissioned as a lieutenant general by President Lincoln in Washington, between the victories at Chattanooga and the slaughter that was to come in Virginia, a raid was being proposed. Two men, General Hugh Judson Kilpatrick and Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren, were conceiving the raid, feeling that the Confederate capital of Richmond to be lightly defended. This raid was proposed because of lack of fair treatment by Union POWs in Confederate prisons. It was not long before the prisoner exchanges between the belligerents were stopped because the Confederates would not accept treatment of black prisoners as equal with whites. Around 1,500 Union prisoners were dying daily in Confederate establishments like Camp Sumter in Andersonville, Georgia.
To avenge this, Kilpatrick and Dahlgren would conduct a raid on Richmond, Virginia, the Confederate capital. Kilpatrick consulted with President Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton and received approval from them both. He consulted with Dahlgren, who lost his leg at Gettysburg in July of 1863, but ready for more action, who obliged. Kilpatrick and his men, 3,500 strong, would approach from the north. Dahlgren and his 300 would march from the south. Their objectives? To destroy Confederate infrastructure and release prisoners from Belle Isle, an island in the middle of the James River in Richmond, where a prison was established.
They left Stevenson, Virginia on February 28, 1864. The next day, Kilpatrick arrived in Beaver Dam Station. Though he destroyed some of the railroad infrastructure, he did not prevent word from reaching Richmond. On March 2nd, a Confederate detachment under Wade Hampton met Kilpatrick's forces outside of Richmond. Kilpatrick retreated to the Union defenses of Yorktown. He may or may not have made plans to feed or care for the released prisoners, similar to the ill-planned raid on Harper's Ferry by John Brown in 1859 failed to plan on how to provide for freed enslaved people there. Dahlgren also had problems. His men made it to the James River, but also had to retreat as the river was swollen, and the lightly defended Richmond wasn't so lightly defended. As Dahlgren retreated to the east, they ran into and were ambushed by Virginia cavalry. Dahlgren was killed and over 135 were captured.
The most important consequence of this raid, also known as the Battle of Walkerton, were the papers that were found on Dahlgren's body, which seemingly ordered the assassination of Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his entire cabinet. A 13-year-old boy who participated in the Virginia Home Guard supposedly found the documents and gave them to his teacher. These documents were passed among the Confederate leadership, including Davis himself, as he read through the papers and paused at the order of the assassination. Subsequently published in the Richmond papers on March 5th and incited rage among the Southern populace. The papers read in part:
"We hope to release the prisoners from Belle Island first, and having seen them fairly started, we will cross the James River into Richmond, destroying the bridges after us and exhorting the released prisoners to destroy and burn the hateful city, and do not allow the rebel leader Davis and his traitorous crew to escape. The prisoners must render great assistance, as you cannot leave your ranks too far or become too much scattered, or you will be lost. The bridges once secured and the prisoners loosened over the river, the bridges will be secured and the city destroyed. The men must keep together and well in hand, and once in the city it must be destroyed and Jeff Davis and his cabinet killed."
Not only were there public outcries of outrage, but Dahlgren's body was exhumed from his interment site where he was slain and desecrated publicly, and then reburied in an unmarked grave. A Union spy secretly reburied him outside of Richmond to avoid further indignity.
There were conspiracy theories that Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, or even President Lincoln himself, gave or approved of the orders of the burning and assassination of Davis and his cabinet. The head of the Army of the Potomac, George Gordon Meade, declared to Confederate General Robert E. Lee that the papers were not sanctioned by the government. There was an even later question of their authenticity by Dahlgren's father, Admiral John Dahlgren, as Dahlgren's signature looked to be misspelled, with the L before the H instead of the H before the L. Therefore, the younger Dahlgren could not have written it. But in the Smithsonian Channel program in 2019, Civil War historian Kevin Powlack brought a copy of the orders to a handwriting expert who observed the documents. After seeing that the original document was written on both sides, The handwriting of this document compared that to the Dahlgren of his father, and the letter Y bleeding through to the signature side. The letters were proclaimed legitimate by the authenticator.
Though we know now that the author is indeed Ulrich Dahlgren and the papers are legitimate, a big question is, who inspired the orders to kill Davis and his cabinet? Was it Stanton? Was it Lincoln? Or could it have just been conceived by Dahlgren himself? Or maybe the pair of Dahlgren and Kilpatrick? We may never know, but I have a feeling that they may have well been influential to John Wilkes Booth's assassination of Lincoln on April 14th and 15th, 1865. My thanks to Alan Jones for suggesting this topic, and if any of you have any other topics you would like to suggest for me to cover, please do so in the comments, and also please like and subscribe to this channel so I can make more videos like this, and possibly with your help I can make them even more often than weekly, and you know what that may mean. Anyway, thanks for making history with me this week. I am Bill Scott. Go make some history of your own today.